What's good, folks? Welcome to another episode of the Cover One Film Room, part, of course, of the Cover One Sports Network. I'm one of your two hosts on this evening, Anthony Prohaska, joined by Eric Turner, joined by Sarah in the chat saying, "What up, fam?" Joined by some other
She's
people in the
asking,
chat.
where's RJ? Because RJ, where is RJ?
Yeah, where is RJ? That's a good question. Like, it's funny to see like the people, the regulars,
Yeah.
like circulate and be like, "Where's so and so?" and "Where's so and
What's up,
so?"
Jess?
Jessica's already hitting it hard,
Yeah,
saying,
she's
"Do it
like,
all
right,
comes
get
down
to
to
the point.
Dorsey."
Let's go. She's
She,
asking about Dorsey.
she was
Does it
hitting
all
on
come down to him?
she was hitting on some pieces last night in disguise coverage last night. Like all I had to do was say Ken Dorsey once, and the chat immediately just like turned. It's an intense piece with what Ken Dorsey is and what he brings to the table. And what we're going to talk about in this episode are some pretty relevant pieces to Ken Dorsey this year and to the Bills team as a whole as we dive into some results from Bills rookie minicamp and take a look at some of the Bills rookies and some free agents that they invited to rookie minicamp who they ended up signing. So, Eric, we're going to take a peek at those players in this episode and kind of our takeaways from rookie minicamp and the players and the pieces and things that were said, things that should be taken note of going forward. But before we do that, how you feeling? How's life? What's going on?
Good, man. Yeah, we're gonna talk some rookie mini camp, some of the guys that tried out and then signed. We got some film, of course, of that. And it's one of those weeks where there's not quite much going on. Like rookie mini camp, the schedule release are in the background. You're waiting for OTAs to start next week, and guys to report and hear how they're doing. So it's kind of like a lull in the schedule right now, which is nice. Don't get me wrong. You're not having to crunch film for 5 different guys was nice. And it's kind of a light film room edition tonight. So please bring your questions. We're going to answer as many as we can about anything you got. So whatever you have, any questions, super chats, obviously get brought up on the screen and answered immediately. Interrupt the show as much as you want. All right, please do. This is one of those shows that you guys are going to carry us and we'll move it along, whether we're talking the film or the analytics. So a little lull in the schedule, but it's been nice to just kind of, step back, take another look at, how the season ended, the signings this offseason, and maybe what could happen going forward in the next few weeks.
Yeah, these times when you do get those lulls and it slows down a little bit, it's slow, I think, for the fan base and the consumers of the product. But for guys like us, it's nice to kind of, you almost kind of get to take a step back and survey things a little bit and get to dive into different things and analyze them in different ways, whether it's the large scale or the granular. And tonight's episode will be in that vein. But like Eric said, as we are all about here on this brand, we love the engagement. We enjoy the hell out of you folks. So everybody riding with us live on this episode, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, whether it's something that we're talking about in the moment, a specific player or a specific piece, or that's funny, nobody interrupts. I love how it's just like that's generic Facebook user and then like no picture. That seems so sketchy.
It is weird that it doesn't show up. Maybe that's because they're not signed in or something.
I wish that was their profile. Like their name was Facebook user and it was just a generic picture. I love that. So anything, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, whether it's something we're talking about in the moment, whether it's something we haven't talked about, it could be anything and everything we got going on with the Bills, whether it's player related, coaching related, on the field, off the field, schematics. You know how we do here on the film room. So X's and O's, anything and everything you want to pick our brains about, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, throw it up into the chat. But Eric, let's start with the Bills rookie mini camp that just concluded recently, and that kind of once rookie mini camp hits, I started to really feel like, okay, like we've got guys on the field, we've got guys doing stuff, and there were some, as we're going to get to the players who were signed and some takeaways, but there were some things to note overall. And where's your head at coming out of rookie mini camp for the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, there's a few players, big names that the Bills drafted that I want to talk about. When we saw some film, we're going to bring up some tweets from some of the beat reporters. This one's from Matthew Bove. And so I really liked these. Yes, they're running these routes versus there. And this is Dalton Kincaid. And I know a lot of people like, there's not much to take away from this. But to me, when I see this, and Matt is kind of alluding to it when you watch some of this footage, his footage on Kincaid, like he's focusing on his lower body. And this is what stood out to me. And it's something we talked about in the film room, and his lower body, ankle flexion, flexibility, whatever you want to call it. how he's breaking down to snap this route inside. You can see how low he is.
Yeah.
We always used to talk about that with Beasley, right? His
Yes.
knee would damn near hit the turf when he was making these cuts. And when a wide receiver, a tight end, or whatever you want to call Kincaid, when they're able to drop the hips like that, it makes these cuts so much sharper. So you saw him breaking down right here, dropping those hips, dropping the knees, but then it's this cut right there. Look how that right foot and the angle it hits the turf, how he's able to smoothly and efficiently make that turn. Like that type of ability is why he is such a good route runner. He's able to snap his body, snap his head around, and catch the ball like he, is used to doing. And so while these are routes versus air, you can see how, look, his head's already snapped around. He hasn't even fully turned yet. That type of flexibility is why he's such a good route runner. And just, again, running these routes versus air, there's still something to be taken from a lot of this, the footage that we see out of camps.
Oh, absolutely. Every rep is a meaningful rep, whether it's against air, whether it's in rookie minicamp, whether it's training camp, preseason, regular season, whatever have you. And yeah, these are the times where we're able to kind of scour this footage and you start to see some legitimately like meaningful pieces. Like we've talked about his technical fluidity and his athleticism and how smooth he is. And part of the reason that he's able to operate the way he does, Eric, is what you mentioned in that first piece there. Like that's not an easy thing to have that type of body lean and that type of hip flexibility and that type of ankle flexion to be able to get in and out of your routes like that, especially at that size at,
Right.
240 plus 6'4", like that type of athleticism isn't a regular occurrence. That type of body bend and lean and flexibility. I wish we got it a little more from the edges on the Buffalo Bills, but that's a conversation for another time. Yeah, it's nice to see these little pieces and to see those flashes just when somebody's running a simple rep, but you see the proficiency in the technicality and doing things right.
You see the traits that are translating even versus air, right?
Exactly. Like these things matter. Like when you're watching somebody run a route versus air, man, that's nuts how that right knee is just literally almost touching the ground and how he's able to get out of this cut. And even with the other one, when you showed his like head turning around, like that's, no, you're not up against anybody, but what type of habits do you have? And if those type of habits are showing up just in these random drills, the hope is that those habits will continue to game day when it matters most. And, it was nice to see some of these pieces and kind of piece some things together in relation to Kincaid.
Yeah, and so we saw the route running. We saw him working with Boris, and obviously, his work with Boris, and we talked about it when we talked about 12 personnel with Dorsey, Shula, who Boris has worked with, being Greg Olsen, add Tyler Higbee and Dawson Knox to that crew. He's worked with a lot of young tight ends. We also saw Boris at the combine working out with the tight ends and working with that group, so he got to see a lot of these guys firsthand. So I'm sure when they drafted Kincaid in the first, he was extremely excited to start working with this young talent because, man, he may be one of the better guys that he is able to coach when you're talking physically, athletically, from the shoulders up and what he was asked to do at Utah. And then just the traits, he's got a lot to work with. I'm sure Boris is extremely excited to work with him.
Yeah, there's so much to like with Kincaid. Where he is as a receiver and a pass catcher, he's got some polish to him, but he does have like more of a raw trait piece when it comes to like the run blocking aspect. And if you can coach him up, especially a guy like Boris who has that track record, we talked about, the low hanging fruit to connect for everyone is that Greg Olsen piece. This is a good comment from Beta Jim. He says, you can really see the hands technique even against air. Starting to believe the D-Rock statement of best hands out of any position in the last 8 drafts. That's very fair. Like that's a legit, when someone makes a statement like that, that's a bold claim. It's a bold statement, but you see it translate like in against air here, but also on the tape. He goes up and he plucks the ball from the air. And he's talked about it before. The way he plucks it and tucks it away, it comes from his basketball training, like going up and getting a rebound off the glass and putting away. It's nice to see that piece. And it's, again, nice to see him being coached up by a dude who's got a strong track record of coaching up tight ends. And I love the Greg Olsen connection. Like I'm a Miami Hurricanes guy. Greg Olsen coming out was mainly a very, very, very heavily pass catching first type of tight end, even into his time in Chicago. And then all of a sudden, I was so mad when the Bears traded him because he was like the number one guy there. That's conversation.
And they traded him for what, a third?
Yeah, something that was just like, you were like, really? Like you traded Olsen for that, and then he goes
Yeah.
to Carolina, and all of a sudden he becomes this
Featured.
overall feature tight end. Like,
dude, he was like, when I look back at some of those numbers, he was being targeted like 25% of their plays.
yeah,
Like he was their offense, especially during those, heyday years when they were making the Super Bowl or whatnot. Like
yeah.
he was getting 25% of their targets. That's absurd.
He was really good from like an actual football perspective as a pass catcher and as a blocker. And then even like from a fantasy perspective, he was like consistently like a top 3, 4, 5 tight end every year because of his target share and his production. And you've got a coach who has coached up guys with similar ability or similar skill sets at similar development points in their career. I think that's a huge piece. We talked about it with Kincaid previously on the show. That can't be understated. When you have a guy with those type of traits and that type of skill set, and then you give him to a person who's good at maximizing those traits and skill sets and in raising the floor and raising your ceiling, it's tremendously an exciting time for Dalton Kincaid. We're pumped about him here, obviously.
Yeah. And, obviously Boris is excited to work with Kincaid, but let's talk about Aaron Kromer working with O'Cyrus Torrence. And Torrence talked about, the reps at left guard and right guard in rookie minicamp, which is not out of the ordinary. That's what Kromer does, especially early on. But I loved when he started talking about the attention to detail in camp and how that's different than being in spring ball or spring camp in college. Because when you're talking rookie mini camps in the NFL, yes, there's a handful of guys, like a good chunk of guys, especially if you're talking offensive linemen in that group where there's only 2 coaches. But that's when a lot of that detail of technique can be hammered out because you get a little more one-on-one. It's not highly in-depth practices because of the CBA. So you get a little more hands-on, which we'll see with, Kromer and Torrence, which hands. That's really Kromer's thing. And in this clip that we're going to see from Sal Capaccio, that's exactly what you see from Aaron Kromer and O'Cyrus Torrence. So it looks right here like he's working at left guard. So this is from Sal Capaccio, and you can see, watch him punch out here with his left hand, but then watch how he kind of they kind of land or make impact on Coach Kromer at different times. And it looks and sounds like Kromer tells him right after the play, hey, you're punching with 2 hands. He wants his hands to hit at the same time. So again, this is where that attention to detail is so important. That time to work one-on-one with a highly drafted offensive lineman. Kromer has to be excited to work with a guy like Torrence because of his physicality, his ability to create displacement. And those hands are one of his greatest assets. They're huge. He's got length. And when he makes impact, he's talking about 2-hand punching here. When he does make impact, like you see the guy's pads pop back, right, Ant?
Yeah, he's got pop in his hands. He creates shock when he gets those mitts on dudes. And he's got the huge hands. He's got the vice grip strength. But seeing that, and this isn't just unique to O'Cyrus Torrence, what I'm about to say, this happens for like a lot of college linemen coming out, like your punch timing, your punch placement. It's so key, especially, building those proper habits with regularity for the NFL. And if you can get him with proper punch timing and placement, given how strong his mitts are and how huge his mitts are, that's an extremely promising, prospect piece right there. Like I love that highlight from rookie minicamp, just seeing them already kind of getting at it. Like I want him to start building those good habits. And again, that's an aspect where you're sitting there thinking, they're not wearing pads. They're not going up against anybody. Nobody can hit. But this is where you start to build the foundation for those good habits that will translate to meaningful reps as the offseason continues. And then once the season starts.
Yeah. And so I'm going to turn the volume up on this one. I want you to, they blow the whistle and they go through their motions and movements. And you're going to hear Coach Kromer talk about, hey, I want you punching on that second step. So I'm going to let you listen to that, let you watch it. And then I'm going to rewind it to the beginning and put it in slow motion. And I want you talked about the attention to detail and how he's a quick learner. Just watch this sequence from practice. So this is Kromer is right over Torrence. Second step. So now that's what they want from him, right? So you can see they're setting in this pass protection. They're setting. one step, here comes the right foot, that's the second step, and then punching. I mean, Torrence is on point.
Yes.
Look at that.
Look at
He's
the timing.
setting back 1-2, punch. Now look at everyone else. 1-2, punch. Look at the far offensive lineman. I assume that's the left tackle. He's punching out immediately. That's not what you're supposed to do. And so that just, it's funny to watch this in slow motion and dissect it, because this is what we do in the film room.
Absolutely.
But he punches on that second step. He's, again, a quick learner. And this is a little different movement from him, because you got to think about it. He's at left guard now.
Yeah, it's, I feel like it may be understated for some, but it's not just like, oh, well, if he can play right guard, he can play left guard, just put it on the other side. Like, it can be an uncomfortable thing. Like, I remember even when I started like playing running back, like I was so much more comfortable running to the right than I was to the left. Like, it felt weird to hold the ball like in my left hand, and let alone for like a guard playing in the NFL. Sometimes it can be a little murky, especially for a dude who is mainly a right guard like O'Cyrus Torrence. But you see him starting to pick up what Kromer's putting down, and the timing and the feet with the punch. And this is also, Brandon Beane has talked about it. Like, this is what they're starting to look for in these practices. Like, you want to see how fast guys can learn, how fast guys can pick up pieces. If they do something wrong and you coach them on it, how quickly are they able to put that learning and that teaching into proper application and execution, so that way they can correct those mistakes? And then do they continue to make those mistakes again, or have they cleaned it up? And it's a nice piece. And Eric, I highlighted this question from Jim. I thought it was a good one. He said, what do you make of Torrance's statement regarding Kromer's willingness to modify technique based on body type and strengths? Eric, this goes to something
Truthfully.
this goes to something that Mitch Morse talked about last year when he was, I know they talked about last year with us. This is something that Kromer loves to do. And this was, I think you tweeted out something in regards to this. I think you actually posted the clip from when we were in the film room with Mitch Morse last year regarding this.
Yeah, I'll try to find it. But yeah, this is something we talked about with Morse, and when they first brought Kromer in last year, and what we asked him, like, what was the difference between Andy Heck in Kansas City, Aaron Kromer, Bobby Johnson, like what were the differences between all of them? And the one thing he mentioned about Kromer, it's obviously something they talked about, was the fact that Kromer is going to teach and really mold his techniques and fundamentals to the type of player that he's coaching, to each individual player. So Mitch Morse, taller, skinnier, not as powerful guy, more of a quick guy, finesse guy. He's got to be taught differently than Torrence, right? And so when Sal asked that at the presser, and that came out, it's like, yeah, that's exactly what Morse said when Kromer came in. So it's something that Kromer has preached every stop he's been at, how he teaches that way and kind of molds all of his techniques to each individual player based on what they can do physically or physiologically.
Well said. And that's honestly like the way you have to go about it. You can't have someone who's 6'4", 330 pounds playing the same way as someone who's 6'1", 305 pounds. They're not going to have the same, like you said, physiological makeup. They're probably also not going to have the same quickness or the same skill set. They're not going to win in the same way, and they're not going to lose in the same way. And it was awesome to hear Morse talk about that last year. And, Jim, with your comment here, like Torrance's statement is one that we're not surprised by. And it's one that we really kind of use to pound the table for when it comes to Aaron Kromer talking about how good he is as a coach. And I was doing this long enough to stall so that Eric could bring up this clip. And lo and behold, here we are.
Yeah, I just got to find where it is. Hold on.
And put in positions to do that the most frequently, right? Every coach does that. And, I think what Kromer is going to do is understand that physiologically, like I've said before, people are just not built the same.
Right.
Like maybe I can't bend the way Dion does, or, Cody, or all this stuff. It's just certain things. So he understands that and goes from there. And I think I could probably answer this question better for you in a year.
Right.
We're still trying to figure it out.
Sure.
It's which is kind of one of those things that it's a little bit, it's exciting, but at the same time, it's a little daunting, because we do have these expectations for where we want to be, what kind of offensive line we want to be. And we're all trying to gel together, and it's a whole new cast of characters for the most part. So it makes it fun, but also it makes it, the sense of urgency is an all-time high.
Yeah, I love that clip, because I made a note of it, and like if and or when we get him back, I'm gonna be like, so I want to play this clip for you. Like, it's been a year, so thoughts? Like,
yeah, no, that would be cool to get him back in this offseason, and like you said, get his thoughts on how that first year went. Because he's very forthright and he just explains it so well. He's perfect for the film room, right?
he's awesome.
Taking this complex game, schemes, techniques, and assignments and translating it to the average fan. He's just so well spoken and does it so well. I can't wait to get him back in the film room. But yeah, so that's a great question, and it's something that Mitch, again, he nailed last year in the offseason in the film room. And it makes sense. That's all good coaches do that. And you heard Mitch talk about that. You know, all the good coaches, you know, will adjust to their personnel, right? And like that's what a good coach does. And then they're able to teach it properly to each guy. So again, kind of going back to that attention to detail and the rookie minicamp and getting Kromer hands-on with Torrence. He's literally almost every rep you see from camp. He's right in front of Torrence. He's teaching Torrence and getting all that one-on-one time. So it was cool to see Kromer working with Torrence, Boris working with Kincaid. And the next guy I want to talk about, though, is Justin Shorter. Obviously, we've talked about him a few times in the film room already.
The next Terrell Owens.
Yeah. Yeah, the next TO. I forgot about that. The next TO. And without a shirt, I get it. Yes. But pump the brakes, as AQ says. Pump the brakes. I want to get your thoughts on some of the footage and things we heard about Shorter and what he brings to the Bills wide receiver room.
Well, first, you know, he brings a dynamic that the Bills receiver room does not have right now with the combination of size, frame, plus speed, you know, at 6'4", 229 pounds, and then running a 4.5, 540. Like, you're going to see the 4.55 and be like, well, that's kind of slow. Not when you have the legs that he has and the stride and the gait that he has. Like, dude can move. We talked about it when we broke down some of his tape after the Bills drafted him, and you know all about him. He was one of your targets when we did some pre-draft stuff for the Bills here on the show. I'm excited for that dynamic, a bit of more of a longer term project, but he's got some X receiver potential. He's going to contribute on special teams right away. But what I liked seeing from him in rookie minicamp, he just looked really smooth and really fluid. And for a guy who is leggy, like he's got long legs, it's not always easy for those kind of dudes to get in and out of their breaks quickly. Sometimes they use too many steps. Sometimes they're just slower in how they kind of plod their feet instead of having like that quick, like pep, pep, and you get out of your break. I still do think he has some work to do in that regard, but yeah. I thought he showed better quickness that I had anticipated for him from a footwork perspective. And I'm hoping he can continue to clean that up, because if you can take that size and frame and speed and add a little route running polish to it and some route running precision, I think that obviously increases his long-term trajectory. And it's something that I think could make him really dangerous.
Right. And so we know he's that vertical threat. Like, we talked about how, you know, he had a really high yards per reception rate, and how we showed a bunch of clips of him working deep. This is one of those routes that they're kind of preying on that scouting breakdown and that pre-scout and pre-game scouting on him, because you can see as he's running this route right there, that little hezzy step right there, he's selling a go route. So now he's going to burst outside, get outside leverage, run up the red line, and run one of those go routes, one of those back shoulder, you know, passes that he did so well at Florida. So they're kind of preying on that, right? But then, as you said, you know, he does getting in out of breaks. It's tough. You can see he does drop his hips well. He's a big guy. It's going to be a little different than some of the shorter slot receivers that the Bills have. But to me, this is, you know, where he really shines, at the catch point. Look at the length, fully extended, away from his body, you know, framing it damn near perfectly. And then, more importantly, eyes on the ball all the way through the catch. That right there is, we talked about, he didn't have many drops in college, you know, and this is really what he brings, aside from, you know, his natural measurables and you know, height and length. But this right here is really, aside, and I should say special teams, because that's what he's also known for. But these hands are really in length, are really going to what separate him when it comes to this wide receiver room. It just, that was cool to see him looking it in. And that really just goes to, we talk about with Kincaid and his elite hands. That really just goes to show why he is so good at catching the ball.
Yeah, that type of focus and concentration to like textbook look the ball in as he goes up and plucks it out of the air. It's really encouraging to see, especially when you pair that again with the size and frame and the length and the catch radius. Like you've got somebody who can operate in that way, but who makes quarterback friendly plays, because this is a dude that, Cole Beasley was absolutely tremendous, but smaller dude, smaller frame, you got to put it on his body. Similar piece with Isaiah McKenzie, even Dawson Knox, like big guy, but not like the longest type of arms. You take these guys like Kincaid, you take these guys like Justin Shorter, who, granted, they're at different trajectories in their career, but you take these guys who have these larger catch radiuses, and you don't have to be as precise with the ball. You don't have to put it right on the numbers. You can put it a little away from their body a little bit, or maybe lead them or throw it away from a defender. They can go up and get it for you. And even with this throw here, like him coming out of the break, and it's like, okay. And then all of a sudden he just plucks it out of the air, full extension, reaches. That's an exciting piece to see. And again, that's another piece of the dynamic and skill set he brings to this wide receiver room that isn't currently existing right now. It didn't exist last year, really. And, aside from him, it's kind of few and far between. And it could be going forward. Like right now, the bigger receivers on this team are Justin Shorter and Gabe Davis. And maybe Gabe Davis balls out and he's not back next year because he gets paid on the open market. And then it's like, okay, kind of back to the Smurf wide receiver room. Cause then it's like, okay, it's Diggs and it's Hardy and it's Khalil Shakir, and you got Sherfield, but he's on a 1-year deal. So it's nice to have a guy with that type of, uniqueness to him in your back pocket, potentially for 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. And again, I do like, he's going to obviously be a special teams guy. Like he's going to play all 4 phases and pay his dues there.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that Bean, when he was talking about Shorter, was, aside from his physical measurables, he talked about, being that 4-phase special teamer. So
said it could get him a jersey as a rookie.
Yeah, which that's quite an endorsement to even mention that, and dangle that carrot out in front of him. Yeah. So it seems like he has a plan, a developmental plan for that guy. As you said, maybe he is that insurance for Gabe if Gabe isn't able to get his contract, second contract with the Bills. But he brings a lot of the same type of things, but that we can see. Like if you talk to other players about Gabe Davis, they're gonna gush about him, and a lot of what they're gushing about him is stuff that we as fans don't see a lot. Right? How hard he works, how he wins damn near every competition that is thrown at the players, among the players at practices and stuff. How he's won that Iron Man award for being in the best shape, and he's going to blow up this year. Gabe Davis is going to blow up this year. And so if they have to move on from him, if they can't find the numbers that work for the team, maybe in year 2 or maybe even year 3, Shorter has a role and it progressively gets, stronger and stronger, just like Gabe's did when they brought him in.
Yeah. And a piece I want to mention too about, you talked about that Iron Man kind of dude that Gabe Davis is, and this isn't to give him a pass for anything last year, but he banged up his ankle really bad early on in the year. And he was the dude when, no disrespect to anyone else, he stayed on the field in Miami when like Diggs had to go out because he was gassed and he was cramping. Like Davis stayed on the field with one ankle. When they were in Baltimore in
98% of the snaps or something like ridiculous number, right?
And then almost the exact same snap share against Baltimore in a monsoon with horrible footing, again on a bad ankle, and dude is out there.
And 3 drops were in that game, but no one wants to talk about that.
But no one wants to talk about that piece. I mean, it's crazy how dudes drop the ball when there's a torrential downpour going on. Dude was on like one ankle for a significant portion of the early part of the year, and he didn't miss a beat from a snap share perspective. Like they had to rely on him, and they did. And you could tell, like you watch some of the tape, and I'm not saying that to you because you watch the tape, but to the people, you watch some of the tape, and you watch him how he runs routes. You could tell he's kind of favoring that ankle because it was legitimately hurt. Like he's a dude that grinds in every which way, shape, and form, and that's part of the reason why he has so much of his teammates' respect, starting with Josh Allen and going through everybody else. Like even got Cole Beasley like and talking him up. Like Diggs, like everybody recognizes the work he puts in and the quality of player that he is, and a lot of it stems from how hard he grinds and that competition level that he brings.
Right. So that's kind of the segment for our rookie minicamp talk. But after that minicamp, there are a few guys that had tryouts, and after that, the Bills went out and signed him. And the first guy I want to talk about is a guy that went to UCF, That knows Gabe Davis,
Gabe
running
Davis?
back Isaiah Bowser, bigger running back, 6'1", 220, 225 range.
Yep.
Ran, I think, a 4.5 40-yard dash. And
Yep.
his film was very limited. We don't really have too much coaches film. I contacted UCF the last couple of days trying to get some. I was like, just give me 2 or 3 games, please. Like, we're gonna do a film room with him. I had him lined up to come in here with us, but they only were able to send highlights. So I'll play those here in a second. But I was surprised with how well he leans. When we talk about lean with running back, he runs with he's behind his pads, and those arm tackles aren't bringing him down. He's a thicker back, man, but he's still got some really good footwork for his size.
Yeah, his feet are a thing I think that stood out, because the first thing that stood out to me was the overall size. Like, he is a bigger dude, even when you see him rocking around the goal line and the Wildcat looks. And he was tremendously productive in those goal line areas. Like, Eric, I know you got some stats for that, but overall he had 16 touchdowns this past year. He's got a nose for the goal line. And Eric, you'll dive further into that piece, but you see the size in the frame at 6'1", 225, but he does have good feet. And there's a couple big runs that, even if for people who want to highlight watch from that perspective, like, he busts off some big runs for UCF where he's got some jump cuts and he's got some lateral agility and
he's got
spin
moves. He's got a nice spin move too.
Yeah, especially for a dude at 6'1", 225. But what's interesting, really with it is this another dude in the mold of kind of these depth running backs for the Bills that aside from James Cook, you've got your Harrises, you've got your Murray, you've got Bowser now. And, as Patrick in the comments says, Peyton Hillis 2.0, kind of like the Bills seem to be kind of building a running back stable of bigger, more physical downhill type of running backs. And Bowser is in that mold with his size and frame and his nose for the end zone.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. And when you talk about the end zone, like some of these numbers that I pulled from the last 2 seasons, so the last 2 years at UCF, because he did have some time at Northwestern, but listen to these numbers over the last 2 seasons. So he had 364 attempts, 1,502 rushing yards, and as Ant said, 25 touchdowns. 16 of them were last season, 9 the year before. So the 25 touchdowns over the last 2 years among all the guys, the running backs in this last class, that was 9th overall. He had 81 first downs over the last 2 years. That was ranked 23rd. He was 21st in third down conversions, converting 75.6% of the third downs into first downs. But you talked about the Bills, kind of building that running back room, adding more physicality. You add Torrence into the mix, and you add in what the coaches were saying the entire offseason, right, Ant? It started off in the beginning of the offseason of Josh, a big story, like it's not preached every offseason. But we talked about this before, Ant, you and I did. It felt like guys like that, David Edwards, who has, some rapport with Kromer, the running backs, Harris, Latavius Murray as of late, Torrence in the draft, obviously, Bowser. They're adding that physicality element. They're adding that, short yardage element. But more importantly, man, the red zone, right? And we talked about it several times in the film room this offseason and during the season last year, and how the Bills for many years had relied on Josh Allen in the red zone almost to a fault. And listen to some of these red zone numbers and you guys listening and watching at home, because they're staggering. So if we look at the red zone numbers from the Bills last year on design runs, all right, last year in the red zone, so inside the 20, they had 10 rushing touchdowns in the red zone. That was 21st. So that includes Josh Allen, right? These are design rushes. So 10 rushing touchdowns in the red zone. That was ranked 21st. The Eagles, to give you an idea, were number 1 with 36 touchdowns. Oof. The Lions had 22 touchdowns and the Cowboys had 21. So that's 1, 2, 3. 36, 22, 21. The Bills had 10. That includes Josh Allen, who's been a monster over the years in the red zone as a rusher. Now, if you cut out all of his rushes and scrambles, running backs only in the red zone last year, running backs only had 5 touchdowns in the red zone. That's ranked 28th, Anthony. That's why the Bills, we talked about what the media was kind of alluding to about the scrambling, the hitting, Josh Allen, protecting Josh Allen, not taking those unnecessary hits. But to me, these actions and acquisitions, and when you look at all the numbers in hindsight, especially, this screams protecting Josh Allen, right? This screams, hey, we're going to run the ball with our running backs. We're going to run the ball behind our second round draft pick who's a mauler and can create that displacement next to Spencer Brown.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to protect Josh Allen that way. Something I want you to talk about too is the quarterback rushing, right? Like, even that moneymaker over the last few years kind of struggled last year under Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen.
Yeah, it faltered a little bit for sure. I think, I talked about this a bit last night in Disguise coverage. I went down the rabbit hole a little bit with the red zone piece because I just wanted to see like because Eric, like you talked about, we talked about it last year multiple times during the season in the film room. We did a special one-off episode for premium members for the Cover One,
the
Cover One universe or the multiverse, and so I went down the rabbit hole, and so his scrambling numbers weren't too different from an EPA perspective. I went from 2020 through 2022. And you look at his scrambles, 2020, his EPA was 0.21, kind of meh. Jumped up in 2021 to 3.9, and then 2022 was 3.12. So pretty close to what it was in 2021, 3.9 versus 3.12. But the design runs, your QB powers, your pin and pulls, your sneaks, your draws, all that kind of stuff. 2020, Josh Allen's EPA, boom, there you go. EPA rushing in the red zone. 2020, it was negative 2.29. And then 2021 took a huge jump up at 8.96. Then 2022 dropped down again to negative 1.75. And that goes on top of Josh Allen's red zone passing, where he was 36th out of 37 qualifying QBs and EPA with an EPA of negative 20.05. A lot of that is because of the turnovers. They killed him. He was first in interception percentage in the red zone at 6.5%, also first in total interceptions in the red zone at 6. And he struggled a bit in the red zone. Ken Dorsey, I think he got better as the year went on, Ken Dorsey in the red zone, but early on, it was a bit of a struggle and a pain point with design and usage. Eric, I mean, an easy one that we talked about, like Dawson Knox was kept in the block early in the season in the red zone, but Dorsey started to iron some kinks out a little bit, still needed to get better there, still does need to get better.
And how did they do that? You heard Josh Allen talk about in one of his pregame interviews, they went back to some of those old concepts, which is, again, something we covered in that uncovered episode for premium members and the red zone issues. Is he went back to some of those Brian Dable concepts that Josh Allen and these guys that have been in this offense for so many years were so used to running. And that's, again, you saw that efficiency go up as the season went on and as his arm got better as well, too.
Yeah, good point, too, as well. Yeah, there were overall in the red zone. Actually, we want to go further. So 2021, the Bills overall in the red zone were 4th in red zone DVOA. Overall, 12th in the pass, 4th in the rush. In 2022, they were 25th overall, 18th in the pass. But the big one, 27th running the ball in DVOA in the red zone. So in 2021, they were 4th in rushing DVOA in the red zone. 2022, they were 27th in rushing DVOA. And part of that ties into Josh Allen's huge drop in EPA in that area, and also some of the ineffectiveness from the running backs. Eric, you brought up several stats. We also had, the Bills running backs alone, just from running back carries in the red zone, they were 30th in yards after contact per attempt in the red zone at 1.3. It was just not ideal. Oh, I got to stop. This is a super chat. It caught my eyes. Whitetown's King is one of our legitimate,
he always
consistent support. Yeah, 1,000%. His presence. And then the super chat as well. So thank you very much for being here, Whitetown's King. Thank you very much for the super chat. And he says, it looks like we're transitioning into the 2015 Panthers mold, but with better playmakers on the outside. And Eric, you've got a legit wide receiver one. You've got a really fun piece with Gabe Davis, but now you've got more of that physical presence with 12 personnel potential, even with a guy like Dalton Kincaid, whose strength is not run blocking, but he is willing and functional. And then you're putting that with a physical downhill mauler in an O'Cyrus Torrence, if he's there at right guard. And then, like we talked about, this cavalcade of running backs, whether it's Murray or Harris or potentially Bowser, you've got this physical presence that can work anywhere on the field, but especially in the red zone. And that running game, whether it's in between the 20s or inside the 20, that's a form of an easy button for Josh Allen. Like, that's a form we so much of the conversation, and this is the verbiage I love that you used earlier. You talked about protecting Josh Allen. I think so much of it for people is like, oh, pass protection. That's what protecting Josh Allen means. A form of protection for Josh Allen as well could be him having to do nothing and just turning around and handing the ball off.
Yeah. Boom. Take a mental rep off. Yeah. You don't have to do everything, not just physically. We see all of that, but even to a certain extent, even on these run plays, he's got a process and checklist he has to go through as a quarterback. But after the ball snap and he just hands it off, he can just take a break, right? He can take a break mentally and get ready for the next play and get ready for the next big down. I like, the comment there, Y-Town said, talks about that mold. I do think they want to bring that physicality back. And I think that's something you saw with that 2015 Panthers and even, years leading into that Super Bowl run, as they were very physical up front. It was a power spread team. It was Cam Newton from the spread. Obviously, he played in that type of scheme his entire career. It translated well, and they brought it in a lot of those concepts from his time at Auburn and whatnot to the Panthers. And so that power spread game is what I think they're trying to emulate when it comes to the Bills now. And I think it's a good time to pivot to that. And, they've put in a lot of assets to still have the fastball, the spread game when they want to, but now they have that element late in the season when they do want to run the ball, when they do need a short yardage touchdown, when they do want to run the clock out with 4 minutes left. They have those elements now to just, switch to it and close a game out. So I totally agree with that transition. We talked about it in the film room. It might have been last week. Yeah, we watched some of that film, that reloading film from Sean McDermott's time in Carolina and whatnot. So I agree. I think when you talk, bring it back to Bowser, 25 rushing touchdowns over the last 2 years. That's, ninth in this class over the last 2 years. All 25 of those were red zone touchdowns. Damian Harris, the guy that the Bills brought in, Damian Harris over the last 2 seasons had, I think, 16 or 17 red zone touchdowns. Latavius Murray over the last 2 years, 11 touchdowns in the red zone. Like, so they're
that's with a limited workload for him and not always playing. So like his 11 touchdowns given his snap share is ridiculous.
Yeah. So here it is. Damian Harris, 16 red zone touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, 13 in 2021. That's when he had a better year. This past season was a tire fire under Matt Patricia, but 16 red zone touchdowns over the last 2 years by Harris. And then, as I said, with Murray, that was one of the things that really stuck out when they brought him in. Again, a bigger back. And I don't want to say he's a power back because for his size, he relies on his vision more. He's a lot different than Bowser. I think Bowser's more of a banger and kind of plays to his Bowser name.
Yeah, he's a hammer.
Right. And I think Murray's a little more elusive and relies more on his vision. But as you can see here, red zone touchdowns, 11, and that was 17th over the last 2 years. So I think that's an area they want to get better in, right? Red zone, but even more importantly, that low red zone, that goal-to-goal situation. And the last 2 years, or no, actually, this is 2022. In goal-to-goal situation, 1.5 yards per attempt. That was 23rd in the NFL. That's 23rd, 1.5 yards per attempt. 8 rushing touchdowns in goal-to-goal situations by the Bills. That's 22nd. And 19.25 rushes per touchdown last season in goal-to-goal situations. That's 31st overall. So this is an area I think, we've talked about it, and to kind of wrap up the running back segment, it's something we're going to talk about when we get Murray in the film room, hopefully next week or the week after. But improving that red zone efficiency when it comes to the run game, when it comes to running the ball with the running backs, because they need to protect Josh Allen in that way, right, Ant?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you don't want, as much as you want to like use Josh Allen to his full potential and his athleticism, like you don't want him banging in between the tackles and the goal line where it's muddy and dirty and tough and gritty and grimy. Like, you just don't want to throw him in there unless you absolutely need to. And it's a really nice piece when you get into that low red zone and you can just turn around and hand it off to your running backs. And it's also helpful too, because if you have that real threat as a piece of your offense, it makes it harder for the defense to combat you in the low red zone instead of just, you know what, we're going to play cover 2 and drop 7 or 8 and just flood the zone and there's nowhere to go because there's no windows.
Right. And I brought up this graphic made by Andrew Stasel.
I love this graphic.
It's there's a lot to kind of digest here, but I want to just add some perspective on some of these. So, okay, from the top, just think about this last year, running backs only rushing the ball. The Bills were number 1 in rushing yards before contact at 1.92 yards. So overall last year, the Bills were number 1, especially when you're talking up front and getting their running backs beyond the first level and getting, damn near giving the running backs 2 yards before they're even made hit at the next level. So they were number one. They didn't have an issue running the ball. They had the issue committing to it. And now if you look at and apply that perspective and to some of these stats, especially that yards before contact stat, if you look at the second column from the left, the league rank, they're 15th in the red zone. So they went from number one, in the open field, as that field condensed in the red zone inside the 20, they went to 15th. So as that green and that real estate started to shrink and they had to run the ball in that area, they weren't creating that displacement that they were in the open field, which makes sense when you're talking about this spread team, a shotgun team. But then if you look at running backs only, it was even worse there. They're a 20th overall in yards before contact. And as you can see it in a lot of these stats, whether you're including the QB runs in the first two columns on the left in the ranking there, or just looking at running backs only, they weren't good. They weren't good at all. And in running backs only rushes per touchdown, 10.4, that was ranked 30th. This is what we're saying. Guys like Murray, guys like Damian Harris, guys like Bowser to an extent, who, again, he's probably a couple years away, practice squad type player. These are all guys that are going to play a role in one way or another. And more times than not, it's going to happen in the red zone, in the low red zone, in goal-to-go situations.
Absolutely. And that was, I mean, this graph is beautiful in general. Adam does such great work.
Andrew's a man.
Andrew does such great work. I'm confusing all of the people who do like graphic work and metric work for us. I'm fried. The rushes per touchdown is the big one that got me. And as Andrew's graph or chart shows right here, like the 10.4, that's high and it's reflective in the rank. And I think people tend to think like, oh, well, it's easy to like score in the red zone. Or like, so what? This guy has a bunch of like red zone, like rushes for touchdowns. Like that's easy. Like it's not. And yes, it is dependent to a degree on the blocking up front, but it's a legitimate skill to have a nose for the end zone, to have a nose for the goal line and be able to score and produce consistently. And that's what the Bills have from an NFL production standpoint with Damian Harris and Latavius Murray, and also potentially from a college standpoint with what Bowser brings to them. And again, it seems like a concerted effort when you see what they've done with the running backs, but also, again, tying in all the pieces together, tying in that O'Cyrus Torrence piece, because now all of a sudden you've got this big people mover up front who can create that vertical displacement. And all of a sudden, maybe it becomes as simple as, you know what, we're just going to hand off to Damian Harris and have him run behind O'Cyrus Torrence, and we're going to score from inside the 5.
Yeah. And again, then you add in Kincaid in the red zone, right? Like, if you're bringing out 12 personnel in this area, are they going to run? Are they going to pass? Even if are they going to be in a condensed situation or formation? Are they going to be spread it out? Because if you spread it out, that's when Kincaid can actually block really well on some pitches, on some swing screens and wide receiver screens. Like there's so much they can do with their personnel now. They have that pivot now, and it's going to take some time for that rapport to build up, whether you're talking offensive line or even the running backs meshing with the offensive line. But I think they have a bunch of different players that can play these roles. And they are roles that, again, I think the front office and the coaches have really made that concerted effort, as you said, to protect Josh Allen in a multitude of ways. And it's not just about telling Josh to just slide or run out of bounds. I think it was way more than that when you look at all of the transactions this offseason in hindsight. And I think it lends perfectly into this story about Isaiah Bowser and what he brings to the table. But with that said, another great story that came out of rookie minicamp tryouts and whatnot is adding that edge rusher and Shane Ray, man. So I want to get your thoughts on this guy. Great story, as I said. He's been on a little of a hiatus the last few years, right, from the NFL. He's paying his dues. A very emotional guy when he starts talking about that story. But I want to get your thoughts on his story, his play, and maybe, again, his role and ability. If he is able to make this team, what type of role can he play on the Bills defense?
Man, it's so crazy when you see guys like this resurface. Like I completely forgot about Shane Ray. And then as soon as they signed him, he was a unanimous All-American coming out of Mizzou, and he was picked by the Broncos. And it was like, oh my God, now they got Shane Ray to pair with Von Miller, like this edge, like rushing group, like what they could be, yada, yada. And yeah, it didn't necessarily pan out to that piece, but I've been pounding the table, and I know you have as well, for more defensive line help. And we got a little bit on the interior with Poona Ford. I don't know if this move will pan out to that regard, but I'm excited for it regardless. Like, you've got somebody who is a professional edge rusher. We'll see what kind of juice he still has the tank after banging around in the CFL the last couple of years with the Toronto Argonauts. But I thought this was an interesting signing also in connection with what Brandon Beane said. So Brandon Beane said, quote, "We didn't hit on any defensive ends after the draft as far as guys to sign. And so that's why we were excited to get the kid Cameron Klein, who they pulled from the Colts last week, that we claimed from Indy. We probably at some point may look to add a defensive end between now and the start of camp. And so instead of doing a workout, here's a guy in Shane Ray out there. Let's bring him in for a couple of days, test his knowledge, test the skill set, and see where he's at." And I thought that was also interesting as well for them, kind of giving a little peek behind the curtain in terms of where they may be looking to make some future moves. But this is a guy in Shane Ray who, if he can kind of carve a rollout for himself, which I think is a legitimate possibility. You and I are both not the biggest Boogie Basham fans.
Yeah.
So, if Von Miller is healthy whenever he is, Basham would be edge number 4. I think edge number 4 is completely up for grabs because I do not think Basham has a stranglehold on that spot, nor should he. And if Von Miller misses any time, that means Basham's your 3, which means number 3 is up for grabs and number 4 is definitely up for grabs. So I thought it was really cool to see a guy like this get a second chance. And at one point, he was a legitimate, like, top edge rushing prospect, and maybe they can get into that a little
2016,
bit.
2016, 45 pressures and 10 sacks. And we're going to see a couple of clips. We're going to break down a couple of clips. You saw him bump inside a bunch.
Yes.
And this is something that, most teams talk about this and having guys that can do it. But he did it at a really high level when they bumped him inside in Denver. And we're going to show a couple of those clips. I just like, from looking at his NFL film, like we weren't able to get any CFL film like we did with, what's his name? Williams or Duke Williams a few years ago.
The prince that was promised wide receiver 1.
I wasn't able to get film on Shane Ray's time in the CFL, but some of the film we have is from a few years ago in the NFL. But he is very tenacious, quick, active hands. And again, they moved him all up and down the line of scrimmage when we talk about the Denver defense here. So let's take a look at a few of these plays. So here he's an edge rusher, and I want you to watch this cross chop from him against the Chargers. He's able to win that edge, and it's a short drop, and the ball's out. But you can see how quickly he wins this rep because he attacks from a wide alignment, closes that cushion down and that gap down, and then watch it chop right there, cross chop and rip, and he's right there. But of course, Phillip Rivers, in Phillip Rivers fashion, gets rid of the ball. But there's a defender on the other end to get a piece of that and intercept it. So this is really good hand usage from him. And again, if he can put these type of combinations together, that would be a nice sub, personnel package pass rusher to have in the Bills defense.
Yeah, his quick hands and hand technique and usage was always a treat for me, even going back to his time in Missouri, and seeing that juice off the edge and some alignment versatility as well is an added bonus. And I think this is what he brings, even though, again, was kicking around in the CFL for the last couple of years. He brings more refinement to his game from a pass rush, standpoint than Basham has at this point. Maybe even AJ Epinesa has at this point, although Epinesa progressed a lot with his hand technique and usage last year. And you can use him in so many ways. You want to use him as a spiker. You want to use him as a looper. Here on this one, you have him lined up almost in a 4-eye on the inside shoulder of Ronnie Stanley, the left tackle there. He gets one-on-one with a guard and just uses his speed and quickness and some power. Look how he just rips through that guard and then flattens and gets to Joe Flacco. Like, that shows some core strength and some tenacity and tenaciousness like you talked about earlier.
Yeah, and being able to move him around. It's something they did with Basham last year. And actually, and we talk about Basham, I know, we're not too high on him and still aren't, but in the playoffs, he actually, when he was in, you can argue the situations. He did create some pass rushes and pressures and whatnot. He was up there as far as DNs go for the Bills. But they like to bump him inside, and just like this as well, too, because he did have some of that size to do so. Here's another one with him just inside the tackle in that 4-eye. And again, this is against Tooney. And you can see that aggressive punch and set from Tooney, and that quickness and change of direction is what the Bills are looking for, so that you can create that disruption and create it quickly with the quarterback on the spot. That's the type of stuff that the Bills need to do consistently, because they have been able to create pressure, and quick pressure for that matter. They've always been that in the top 10, top 5 when it comes to quick pressure, but it's getting home is really what they have had stressed, and why they went out and got Von Miller, and getting again, the more guys you can get in there to compete, to play these type of roles, whether it's on the edge or inside, you can never have enough pass rushers that have the versatility to rush from the edge or inside.
Absolutely. And this clip actually lines up perfectly with a question from Beta Jim again, who says, how much of Shane's success in 2016 was because Von Miller was on the opposite side of him that year? That's a fair question to ask. Yeah. And, it probably played a role. And maybe even it played a role here on this play with the Pats, sliding from the center over and sliding to the right because Von Miller is on that side. But even if that is part of the piece, Shane Ray is still executing his assignment to almost perfect execution here against a really good guard.
And to your point, yes, he's executing, and this is that next level. Yes, they're sliding from the center, right guard, right tackle. They're sliding to Von Miller, but the guy they chose to win a one-on-one matchup, was this guy versus a very good guard. So
that is the mismatch they're creating. They are hoping that they can create a one-on-one on the inside, similar to what the Bengals did against Roger Saffold last year. They're creating that purposefully. Shane Ray has to go out and execute.
This is Ware over here too, right? So this is DeMarcus Ware. So yeah.
They have to. And he gets that one-on-one. The Broncos are scheming that up. They know what's up. Shane Ray has to go out, and he has to beat an all-pro guard, and he beats him almost immediately on the snap. Like, that's a really nice piece. So it is fair to question it, like, well, how much of his success was because he was working with this all-pro dude? And again, even in this year, like, he's rotating with DeMarcus Ware as well. So it's a fair question to ask, but it doesn't take away from how he won. Man, this one's gorgeous. Like, I just want to stop and let this one play. Like, this piece is nice.
So to that point, here's Miller winning his one-on-one, forcing this quarterback to step in the pocket, who's coming to clean up, Shane Ray. And he's not just finishing that play, he's creating that fumble and that turnover. So, yeah, of course, when Von Miller's on the field or DeMarcus Ware's on the field, they are going to command that attention. But that doesn't take away from a player like Ray to execute, a player like Gregory Rousseau to execute opposite Von Miller. So, yes, he did play a part in it, and he's going to when he is back on the field and healthy. But again, Shane Ray still has to execute, and you can see some of the technique and some of the hand usage and his active hands and the tenacity all pop on film again a few years ago. But these are the type of the traits that you're going to bring and hope he can bring a fraction of that now to the Bills. And at the very least, maybe he doesn't make it, but he pushes and makes everyone else elevate their game.
And that's such a great point too. Like, I don't want anyone to think we're sitting here and saying, you know what, this is going to be the Shane Ray that the Bills are getting, and here's edge number 1 or 2. But it's worth the flyer. You're bringing in a guy who's hungry and who wants it and who has proven ability, and maybe he feels like, he hasn't maxed out to his potential and what he could have been. We know he appreciates that opportunity. And Roy says it right there. At this point, I don't see Shane Ray even being able to beat out Boogie. I don't think that's necessarily what we're saying at all, but I think that spot on the back end of the edge rotation is up for grabs. And if you
need to produce, like they were drafted high, Epinesa, Basham,
absolutely.
Like you heard it was either McDermott or Bean talk about it. Like, hey, we told those, second-year players and third-year players, like, hey, now it's time for you to step up. Spencer Brown on the offense. Yeah. And then Spencer Brown on the offense side. But, and I think Boogie, at the beginning of the offseason, he had some, I don't know, diatribe on social media. Maybe it was Instagram. Weird. Right? And so I think during exit meetings, they're like, hey, guys, you need to step up. And as Bean said, hey, they weren't able to address it in the draft. And they still probably are going to try to get one of those high-end pass rush, hopefully Justin Houston. But there are some out there, right? So I agree with Roy. At this point, I don't see Shane Ray even being able to beat out Boogie. Yeah. I agree. But as I said, maybe Shane Ray is the type of player that can push, because he's kind of like that, the cornerbacks or secondary players that this staff loves to bring in not highly touted, don't have the best measurables, have a great story. They were undrafted. They were, redshirted and like, everything was against them, but they still made it. The Levi Wallaces of the world, the Dane Jacksons. Like, I think maybe this is a guy who's got, he wants his last chance and he's really going to push for it. And maybe he doesn't get it. Maybe he doesn't succeed, but he makes everyone else that's ahead of him better.
Yeah, they love those dudes with the chip on their shoulder. And Shane Ray potentially has one. And this is a dude, maybe he reclaims some of his former play and he gets a spot on this team, or maybe he pushes Boogie Basham. Maybe he pushes Kingsley Jonathan, like just makes those guys work hard. There's no real downside here. Like, you're taking a flyer on a dude who wants it and who has some juice, and you'll see how much juice he has left in the tank. And if it works out, cool, he makes the team. If not, you're hoping that iron sharpens iron and he provides some competition. Like, and you're taking a flyer on a dude who wants it and who's going to grind. And that either wins, that helps him to win out, or it makes his competitors win out in that regard. And good for him getting signed. We'll see what he can be. And we'll also see what Travin Howard can be as well, the next player up here on the film room, former linebacker of the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, and a guy that I really loved coming out of college, kind of undersized, especially when we're talking weight, a little lighter, but you're going to see his movement skills, especially on this film. And if you go look at some of his TCU film, his movement skills are special. He's really good feet, very reactive with his feet. And he goes and makes a play here on third down in the red zone. As that running back is kind of leaking out into the flats, you see him work around the traffic and then go make a play on the ball. I just really like his movement skills, and it'll be interesting to see where he slots as far as like what role he'll play. Is he going to be a backup to the linebackers, in the will spot? Is it going to be maybe a backup into that big nickel role? Like, he's got some of that versatility, but more importantly, he's got this type of athleticism.
Yeah, I was really impressed with his athleticism, like the closing ability, the quick trigger. And you see, the coverage on that previous play, like he can man mirror some tight ends and some running backs, but he's also got some ability to match in zone a little bit. Like, his eyes don't necessarily mislead him. And then he's got the physical ability to kind of run with these dudes. Again, part of it is because he's undersized. I think he's like 219, 220 pounds. But you'll see him play in the box a bit. He'll play in some of the overhang, and he's a guy who can match with backs coming out of the backfield. Like, he's got an interesting skill set. I was actually pleasantly surprised when I went to watch the tape.
Right, and just watch some of the athleticism again, playing that linebacker role, widens out here with the motion, but watch as the quarterback and receiver dink and dunk right here underneath. Just watch his feet as he triggers. Watch, boom, right there. No wasted movement. So twitchy, comes out of that break, T-steps like a defensive back, and then comes downhill and wraps up that wide receiver. Like, that type of change of direction is nice to have. And so, like I said, we talked about how the defense may be tweaking some things, showing some different looks, obviously changing some of their personnel and how they're going to match up versus teams. Having a guy like Taylor Rapp, another former Ram, like Howard, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with these type of guys, what situations and what personnel groupings they use these type of players, because these are different archetypes than we've had, especially we're talking Howard in the linebacker position. He's a super light guy. And again, maybe he plays not just linebacker, but that, big nickel role where he's that third safety, third linebacker in the slot, because he's got the movement skills to be that.
Yeah, and he's good in underneath coverage, and like he shows here and on the previous play as well. I like that you made that comment, because I wonder, like, watching him on the tape in these games, I was like, how does he get used? Yeah, is he the big nickel? Is he an overhang guy? Like, do they not want to play him in the box? Like, this rep is nice here. Like, you talked about the footwork. I love how he's able to just plant on that left foot and just drive out of it. But even the ability to recognize the coverage, like, as he starts to widen, he peeks inside and he sees Bateman, boom, right there. Like, he peeks, he sees actually Latavius Murray, I believe, coming out of the backfield there. And then he peeks and he sees Rashad Bateman start to come inside on this little kind of snag route, reads to Lamar, closes, quick triggers it. Like, this is some good coverage ability overall from an athleticism standpoint, a quickness standpoint, but also even from a processing standpoint a little bit, his ability to like kind of recognize what's going on. And this one now he's making a play against the run. And this is the way that he's going to have to succeed. He's not the biggest guy. He's not stacking and shedding. You want to see him use that athleticism and that quickness to beat guys. And in this instance, just beats his man, goes right around him and gets into the backfield.
Right. Use that athleticism to avoid blocks, not take on blocks. It's a different game nowadays. There aren't many linebackers on NFL that are stacking and shedding. This looks like it's some sort of cross dog blitz here by Howard and the other linebacker. But as you said, he avoids that block from Zeitler there. He's able to jump right back into the play and trip up the running back. Just really nice. Again, change of direction, twitchiness, athleticism, and just being disruptive at or near the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and another interesting point with it, like you mentioned it at the previous clip, different mold than what they've had before, but also seems to kind of be like the new trend. These like lighter, quicker, faster, smaller, disruptive kind of linebackers. Like he is in the mold of, I think he's got more athleticism in coverage, but in the mold of a Terrell Bernard or maybe even a Dorian Williams to a degree, although he doesn't have like the arm length and the overall size, continuing to go with kind of more of those undersized guys from a frame standpoint, but some similarities in skill set, maybe again, another potential hit or breadcrumb in terms of what they're looking to do at that position group. And maybe by extension, what they're looking to do with the defense.
Right. And watch him read Aaron Donald on this play versus San Francisco. So Donald is obviously blowing up plays as he typically does. So he feels everyone kind of, especially Donald being that force he is, kind of sliding down this way. So he's not just going to run into this gap, run into this block right there. What does he do? He senses that cutback and he's able to cut it back right there, wait for the running back, and then, get in on there on the gang tackle. Like he's really good at, again, changing direction and reading how things are unfolding in front of him. Here he shows off his footwork again, at the line of scrimmage, coming down, scraping, and then sensing that cutback. He's sensing it. He's reading, the flow of the play. Then looking to cut back, avoid the blocks, avoid that traffic. And then as that running back breaks that tackle, he goes in and makes the tackle. Like this is really cool to see from a guy that's undersized, but he knows his strengths. He knows how he has to win, but he's using his eyes and his feet to get to that point, to get to the ball, not his physicality.
Absolutely. Very well said. Also, shout out to Taylor Rapp playing in the box a little bit and helping to force this back inside. You see Howard, like, he's not coming up. He's not trying to stick one of these interior offensive linemen and stack and shed. Like, he's playing to his skill set. He knows who and what he is. This one is a nice one. Like, this is set up for Elijah Mitchell to hit that alley as you outlined there. Like, this is a solid cutback on this zone run. And you get Von Miller coming down from that edge a little bit too there as well, right? Like I noticed that when I was watching the Howard film, I kept being like, oh, there's Von, there's Von. But Mitchell gets through Von Miller, and then Howard comes and he cleans this play up. This is a good feel. This is a good read. This is processing what's happening, but also kind of feeling that out and recognizing, like you said, whoa, everything is flowing over here. Oh, and I see the back. Cool. Let me just quickly sidestep and then knife in there and make a play. Like this is a good feel, and this is some good processing. Again, from a guy who he's going to compete for a roster spot, going to compete for, some depth. It's nice to have that kind of player in the bag from a depth standpoint, just in case you need him, or maybe he could potentially be something more.
Yeah, and so on this play versus Niners, they're going to try to leak this running back up the sideline on a rail or wheel route. So again, how are they using him? This is a weak side formation play. 3-by-1 set, 3 receivers to the bottom. You see him, he's to the weak side. He's matched up on the running back on this play and more of like a quarters coverage type look. But watch him carry this running back up the sideline, and he's there at the catch point, making this throw very difficult, making this catch very difficult. So yeah, he's got that type of ability, whether it's, again, underneath, carrying guys up the sideline, but then these are the type of plays, aside from the special teams, because he's going to have to contribute that way. He's a long shot to make it, in my opinion. But these are the type of plays that coaches love. Watch the hustle on this play. So the ball's going out this way. He's right here. He shoots the back door. And just watch how he adjusts and hustles to the ball. So now the running back's hitting the line of scrimmage. Look at him find and work his way through the traffic and make the tackle on the running back. So he tried shooting back door. So if that running back were to cut it back, he'd be right there. The running back was able to bounce it, but he stays in the play and he hustles to the ball. And like, these are the type of plays that coaches love.
Yeah, the hustle, shooting the gap, finding your way through the garbage and the traffic, like these are you hit it on the head. Like these are the plays. Like he even avoids that pancake block initially and is able to still like kind of keep his footing and then still trace Elijah Mitchell and make this tackle a bit downfield. Like that's a nice play that's going to show up. His quickness and his hustle and his ability, that'll do well for him in training camp and, you know, in preseason against third and fourth teamers or second teamers, potentially, you know, whatever's happening with him there. And yeah, you know, it's a long shot for him to make it, but it's a fun signing. Like he's got some pieces that you like. I think maybe he'll make some plays in camp and in the preseason against those. You know, again, we're showing him playing meaningful reps in a season where the Rams won the Super Bowl, and that continues into the playoffs. He, you know, he plays basically the whole game against the Buccaneers in that divisional round, and then I think he also has the game clinching interception against the Niners in the NFC Championship. So this is a dude who's had some meaningful reps, and you know he should be able to show out against third and fourth teamers and potentially, you know, make some waves for himself. But it's going to be hard for him to crack the spot. But he's got some fun pieces into his game that the coaches may like. Yeah,
you know, this is again one of those lull in the content in the news weeks.
Yeah, we're out here breaking down Travin Howard.
Again, long shots. So we don't want to get everyone's hopes up. We just wanted to show you what they're good at, what they're not good at, maybe their roles in this offense or defensive scheme or special teams for that matter. But really the big picture stuff, like what roles and what, you know, how they could be used, because there are some spots, roster spots that have specific roles in this offense or defense. And so, especially if we're talking like projecting some of what we think is going to happen on that side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball with Sean McDermott, they're obviously gearing up to show us something different this year with him at, you know, at the helm. So, we wanted to bring, you know, some of the rookie minicamp stuff, some of the guys that were signed after those tryouts, and just what they, you know, they could bring to this team, and, you know, what you need to be rooting for, who you want to root for, and what they bring to this team. Because it's that time of year, you know, camp, OTAs around the corner, camps around the corner. And this is when like we start to develop our darlings, our camp darlings, and people that we're rooting for in camp to make the roster. And so we just wanted to bring some realistic projections to some of those guys.
Yeah, that's all it is, you know, breaking down these players for who and what they are and using the game tape to do it instead of just grabbing some highlight and being like, yo, look at this play from Travin Howard. This dude can definitely be like linebacker one. And it's like, what's going on here? What are you doing here? Or comparing Justin Shorter to Terrell Owens. And yeah, that's the piece, you know, to break down here, as Eric, as you said it, like as we really start to rev up towards the 2023 season. It's crazy. I still feel like the Bills just lost to the Bengals. I feel like we were confirming Senior Bowl plans in Mobile.
Yeah.
And man, I miss that food there. I think about the food in Mobile like literally once a week, and just how everything hit like night one at the Mexican spot, and just like everything from out there. Like
we refined what restaurants we hit. Like we have it mapped out pretty, and then we added the beignets, you know, at a breakfast place. That was a new one this year. So that one's
but that place is terrible because it's a chain. I don't know if you heard.
Oh, don't get started, bro. Hey, Brian Dable approves, and he approved of us being there and seeing him there every day. So nothing else matters.
That's fair. Yeah, we got to eat beignets and talk to Brian Dable. So, oh man, I still hate that guy who commented that on Twitter. I will never forget that moment. Yeah, but it just feels like we were in Mobile having great food and scouting Senior Bowl prospects. And now all of a sudden we're in the middle of May, about to be towards the end of May, and OTAs are here. And then we're going to get the full minicamp experience. And then you got training camp revving up. And before we know it, it'll be August and the preseason will be here. Things are starting to really kick into full gear. And, you know, we'll have film for you as much as we possibly can for players, scheme pieces, whether it's practices, whether it's training camp, whether it's preseason, OTAs, all of those pieces. We'll have you covered here in the Cover One Film Room every single week. Eric, any other thoughts for everyone? Whether is it a player in particular? Is it minicamp related? Is it OTAs related? Anything that you have on your mind as we start to move forward in this episode, but as we start to wind down and send the people on their way?
No, you know, I just wanted to say thank you, you know, for everyone tuning in this entire offseason. And it's not over yet. We're going to have a lot more content for you guys. And some of the things we have lined up over the next few weeks are going to be so much fun. And we have some events that are going to be popping up towards the end of summer, where Anthony and I are going to be taking some trips And so that it's going to be fun. It's, this off season is probably, I would say, halfway over, but we have, camp and stuff coming up, and we typically do, go to that. And so
And
we'll
expose all the secrets and things that people
yes, ruin the season for all Bills fans.
Because we showed Khalil Shakir on a hitch. The secret's out. The offense is exposed.
But yeah, so we do have some fun stuff lined up. And as I said, Latavius did say he would be joining us either next week or a week after in the film room. So we are going to talk a little more about the running back situation, maybe, what his role is going to be, his projection when it comes to the roster on, Sundays or whenever they do play. And again, what he's going to bring to this team, whether he's on the field or if he's scratched on game days, because it's a logjam. They brought in a lot of running backs, and it's going to be very competitive, which we're all for. And as I said, smash that like button. But more importantly, like, we couldn't do any of this stuff, the film, the telestrator, the breakdowns, the stats, paying analytics guys like Andrew to come in and make those pretty graphs so that we can visually digest all the numbers that Anthony and I spit out. It's just easier to see and understand on the screen. Like, we couldn't do any of that if it wasn't for our subscribers, if it wasn't for you guys hitting that like button, leaving us a comment, to helping us trend and track, as Anthony always says, on YouTube, on, the audio version of our podcast. But more importantly, sign up for One Pass. That's our premium content. It's our behind the scenes content. More importantly, it's our community. A lot of these guys in our Slack channel, once you sign up, you'll see they become family. We do meetups with all these people. It's crazy. Like, as I said, we do events and we go out and we have people that are, subscribers to us, and we wouldn't be able to do that, without you guys. So if you can't sign up for this, at least leave us, smash that like button, leave us a comment. And if you'd like to listen to this later on, make sure you subscribe to, on Apple, subscribe to our podcast, because there was an issue with that. So I just wanted to say thank you in a long-winded way for all of you guys supporting us in this off season. And it's always been fun for us, even when we are breaking down guys that may not make the roster. Like, it's still fun for us, and you guys still show up and listen to us talk about it. So we love it.
Yeah, it's awesome. Even in like the slow, like, doldrums of the off season, it's a random Wednesday in May at 7:00, and we're rolling in with like over 100 plus watching us break down guys that we may never hear from again in several months. So it's a pretty awesome thing to see. And yeah, sign up for One Pass. It's legitimately worth every penny. Granted, we're probably biased in saying that, but we always talk about the Slack channel, like the community that the Slack channel is. It's just awesome. Like, there's the Bills channel, but there's fantasy football stuff. There's a variety of channels for whatever you're looking for, and the conversations that that people get into there. And I'm super active in my DMs on Slack. Like, I get people who will DM me on Slack because they don't have Twitter, and then I have one-on-one conversations there. And it's just cool to see, like, people who significantly, like, contribute to what we do from an overall support standpoint, but from a financial perspective, Eric, like you said, and just be able to be there if they have like a quick question or they want to go back and forth on something. And I've had DMs with people in the Bills Slack channel for Cover One, and we're talking about the Sabres for like 5-6 hours. Right. And then, they actually be able to meet up with, I've met, Lackawanna Chuck, and I've met Michael Lucas at the Ralph and at training camp. So it's really cool to have those pieces. And
like, the other thing, Ant, is like, when, for example, Isaiah Bowser, signing him, we had that, and our insiders got that info 5 hours before it happened. We get a lot of these insider type tips or rumors or things like that. We share them in Slack before we put it anywhere else. And so that's why you are insiders, and why you guys are the first to hear it, because you guys support us. And again, we wouldn't have any of this network. We wouldn't have any of these cool tools and resources to provide that in-depth information if it wasn't for our insiders. So as we said, just sign up for One Pass. But if not, we understand. We appreciate you tuning in and breaking down film with us every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Smash that like button, leave us a comment, and tell your friends about us. That's enough for us. If that's what it takes, we'll take it.
Yeah, we're appreciative of every single ounce of support, no matter what form it comes in. For those of you who joined us live here on this episode, thank you very much for joining us live. As we said, it is a bit of the slow season, so it's cool to see the ticker consistently going in the chat and all the back and forth you folks are having with each other, the questions you have for us, the back and forth with us, the support, the kind words, the questions, all that stuff. So Thank you to everyone who rode with us live on this episode. If you didn't ride live with us, thank you very much for your post-live viewing here on YouTube or post-live listen on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. If you are here on YouTube live or non-live later, like Eric said, please, 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 and thank you. Drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears and kind of influence that algorithm and swing the pendulum in our favor towards helping, push us from a traffic perspective. If you are on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever have you, whatever is your, platform of choice, please. Nice from Charles Chaplin. Never going to give you up. I like it. Please subscribe on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms you are listening to this show on. Appreciate you, Beta Jim, for being here.
Yeah,
We will see you next week, live Wednesday at 7 p.m. Yeah, please subscribe whatever audio platform you are listening to this show on. If you want to drop a rating or a review as well, those are also tremendously helpful and greatly appreciated. So please do any one of those things. Like Eric said, word of mouth is always tremendous. Tell your family.
Oh no, we lost him. We lost him. There we go. All right, you're coming back. You're a little blurry. I can hear you. Oh, there he is.
We're back. I'm back. We appreciate you folks more than you will possibly know. Whether, whatever form and fashion your support comes in. Thank you very much to everyone for joining us on this episode, tuning into this episode live or post live. We hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. We will see you next week, live Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, for another episode of the Cover One Film Room. And until then, I am Anthony Prohaska. That is Eric Turner. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.